Eddie Shore?
Oh, piss on Eddie Shore.
Old-time hockey?
Piss on old-time hockey. You're blowing it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Growing Up Punk podcast, a podcast about punk rock and all of its friends. We are so glad you decided to join us today. It is a freezing cold day and week here where I am, so wherever this finds you, I hope it brings you some joy and some warmth, whether that's physically or otherwise. Maybe this interview will make your heart tingle with warmth. How about that? There are some nice feelings for you. If you like what we're doing on the show here, please go to growingpunkpod.com. There you will find access to everything you need to hear more interviews, read articles, all that good stuff. Check us out on social media. We love interacting with you, reading your comments, hearing your thoughts. So if you have some, please share them with us. So today is a really exciting interview for me. Russ Rankin from Good Riddance joined me to discuss his top 5 favorite releases from Fat Records. Now, I've been listening to Good Riddance since the mid-90s, and some of those albums mean a lot to me, and so it was really cool to talk with Russ, to hear his thoughts on signing to Fat Records, kind of what was going on during that time. We get into his top 5 albums. Some I was familiar with, some I wasn't, and so it was cool to learn about some albums that I now need to go and listen to myself. We also dive a bit into my favorite Good Riddance record, which is Ballads of the Revolution, and so it was really cool to kind of pick Russ's brain on that album and get some insight and information on that, and so I am really excited for you to hear this. Again, if you like what we're doing here, check us out online. You can rate and review us as well on podcast apps. That helps us get in front of more people. But otherwise, that's it from me. Here is my talk with Russ Rankin from Good Riddance. So what's the first kind of time you remember hearing about Fat Records? You kind of remember when that was, what the release was, kind of what was going on around then?
Yes, I had gone to see NoFX. Well, I went to see probably like 1989, 90, right around there. I went to see Poison Idea at Gilman. I went to all my shows back then at Gilman Street in Berkeley. I would go every weekend. So I went to see Poison Idea, and they didn't show up. And so NoFX became the default headliner. I'd never heard of them. And by the end of the show, I was a fan because their music was pretty fast and it was fun, and they were really silly between songs and would tell jokes, and even though I was usually more serious punk, like it was entertaining. Like it was a show you would leave and be like, that's memorable. Like I was entertained by them. And so my girlfriend and I at the time, who I was with, like, we just started going back to see them whenever they came. They would come, a couple times a year to Gilman Street. And so we started learning, we got their back catalog, and we were fans of NoFX, so we would go see them whenever they played. And then I knew the singer called himself Fat Mike. And then I think they put out the Longest Line EP, and I saw the logo and I thought it was a really cool logo. And then I dug around a little bit and found out that Mike had started a label. At this time, my band we were furiously demoing and working our asses off trying to make it, quote unquote, make it. And by make it, we mean like getting an album and playing shows outside of our hometown. So we were playing anywhere we could. We were recording demos after demos. We were sending them to like 100 to 150 different labels. And so my guitar player and I, because he'd gone a couple times to see NoFX and he liked them too. And we were like, well, fuck, let's send one to Fat because Mike knows what's up, and we like his band, and so that's what happened. And we sent a demo, and we got a handwritten letter back from him, and he liked a couple of the songs, and that's how it started.
Yeah, that's really cool. Because at this point, Like there wasn't probably, a whole lot of prominent releases on the label yet, right? Like you guys were kind of, I know there was, there was some, they'd been around for, it was like 5, 6, 7 years kind of by the time you signed with them.
I don't know when the first release came out. You probably know. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just looking it up. I'm just blanking at the moment what that was, but yeah, there wasn't a whole ton of releases before you guys signed, and so I mean it's really cool that you kind of got to be a part of.
Yeah, I think like Propagandi's first album, Lagwagon's first album. I know those were out. No Use for a Name had released something. I think The Daily Grind maybe was out.
Okay, yeah, some of those really early ones.
And they were yeah, there's the how we actually got signed is a different story, but I don't know if you want to know that or not. But that's how we heard of Fat Records, and that's kind of like the initial connection.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, maybe we can get into that some other time. But, and I mean, obviously, you guys are still still releasing albums on Fat Records. What's kind of kept you with the label all this time? I've seen and read that they just kind of do one record releases with bands and kind of give them that freedom to kind of keep releasing albums on the label, or if they want to go somewhere else. Or some bands have left and come back. What for you guys has just kept you on that label for so long?
We've never had anybody trying to get us away from it, first of all. Like had we been really unhappy with Fat Records, we wouldn't have had immediately anywhere else to go.
Right.
So fortunately for us, they've just been awesome from day one. Like they made our band happen. Like we're from a small beach town, and they gave us the ability to travel all over the world, and they gave us the ability to work as hard as we wanted to work, and they gave us all the resources and infrastructure to make that happen. And they never they never tried to push us one way or the other or dictate any sort of path. And it was we didn't know any better or anything different. But then through the years, we've met countless bands that we've toured with, and a lot of bands that I'm still friends with to this day that we've toured with or played shows with, and eventually that you're sitting around backstage somewhere, and like a guy in a band just picks you to be the person that he unloads on about how unhappy they are with their label. And after hearing enough of those stories, I realized how fortunate we really were. Like for us, we were just like, oh, cool. Like they'll put our records out and then we can just fucking tour all the time. And this was just what we wanted to do. And they'll make it happen. But then like after hearing all these horror stories about other labels, I really felt super, super fortunate.
Yeah, well, it really doesn't really get better than that, for a punk band, right? Like you want to have that freedom. You're not really trying to, get more commercial success, so to speak. I mean, you want to grow your band, and a label like that can easily do that. I think a lot of the times when bands leave, either to a major or, to somewhere maybe they can get more exposure, and which is great. I mean, that's what bands want. But I think it's a good testament to Good Riddance and to Fat Records that that relationship has lasted so long. And I know there's many other bands that have stuck with the label too. So just always kind of curious to hear if that was just kind of a natural thing, or like you said, nobody else was really hunting you guys down, and it seemed to be a relationship that worked really well for both parties.
We were really fortunate to get onto that label at that time, because it was like a boulder getting rolled up the side of a mountain, and then we got on right as it got to the top, and then it kind of snowballed down from there for a while. Like the label blew up really big, which I don't know if anybody could have predicted that. But we were working really hard, and we would have succeeded somehow. And a lot of times I think that luck is the residue of hard work, but we were pretty fortunate. Like it was a sense of really good timing. Like we were in the right place at the right time. We were visible. We were pushing. We were trying to get noticed, and we're just it all worked out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and we could get more into that maybe some other time too. But yeah, so let's kind of dive into some of your favorite releases. So I always love this because I'm always curious to hear what albums kind of influence my favorite bands, and so hopefully there are some on the label that you enjoy, and so we'll get into some of those. And so thanks for taking the opportunity to share a few of those with us. So the first one is Lagwagon's Trashed. So this is the second album by Lagwagon, and it was released on January 4th, 1994. Do you remember hearing this album for the first time, or what was it about it that stuck with you?
Because we were talking to Fat, and it was looking like we were going to be part of that. I bought all the Fat albums and was trying to like listen to what other who are the other bands on this label? Like, what are we going to be in the midst of, kind of thing. Also, that without having anything to compare it to, I wanted to be like, well, fuck, is our band even good enough? Like, if you look, like, let's putting on Trash the first time, I was like, fuck, we're definitely not this good. Like, these songs are great, and the production sounded so good. And I just remember, pretty much every time I listened to Lagwagon of that era or played with them, I would just watch Derek play drums, and it was just blown away constantly. But the songs were great because they were fast and they were tight. There was like some humor to it, but it wasn't like overtly silly all the time. And
right.
It was just a really good mix of stuff. And then we started incorporating some stuff we heard in their music into some of our music, just sort of like maybe this sort of unconscious. We thought, well, we have to kind of sound like this now because we're on Fat, which nobody had ever told us, but we've sort of took it upon ourselves to bring in some of the tempo changes and the stops, which weren't really part of our thing before that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's cool. If you hear that influence, and immediately it wants to, it makes you want to become better musicians and a better band. I think that's a really cool thing. It's not ripping off, right? It's punk music. There's only so much you can do anyways, but I think that's cool for a release that, was pretty young at that time, for you to hear something you liked so much, and to have them as your peers as well, and, to be, taking bits and pieces from each other. So that's really cool. This is actually an album I didn't get into until even kind of the last few years. I've been listening to Lagwagon for a long time, but I didn't get into them until maybe Let's Talk About Feelings, which was a few years later, maybe four years after that, and then kind of everything since then. But I've gone back to this one, and yeah, it's really cool just to hear the different influences on it, and there's a lot of great songs on this one.
Well, there's like, there's a Stoke and the Neighbors, which in hindsight maybe that's a song, like a funny song about drunk driving that didn't really age well. But then there's Island of Shame, which is super mature and heady and smart and way ahead of its time, I thought. So it's kind of like it's all across the board.
Yeah, and I think they kind of kept some of that going throughout the years too. A good mix of kind of serious and silly, and but when it comes down to the music is killer and really stands up. So yeah, great first choice on that one. The second one we're going to go to is Propaganda's Supporting Cast. So this one actually, technically it wasn't on Fat Records. It came out on G7 Welcoming Committee, but I read that Fat Mike helped kind of fund and get that label started.
Yeah, I was fudging the lines there a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's all good. And they had a history with them before, and so it's definitely kind of goes hand in hand. But yeah, Propaganda, they're from my parts here, and so it's kind of cool having a band like that, a very influential band on a lot of different kind of punk bands, whether it's kind of more political punk or even just other styles of punk, like very like a lot more technical than some stuff. And so yeah, why this band, why this album, because they had a handful of albums out by this time, so why is this the one that stands out to you?
Because I think that Dear Coach's Corner is one of the greatest punk songs ever written.
Yeah,
And
so good.
like I get emotional every time I listen to it. And I think that I think it's genius. And it encapsulates for me, like, as a person who feels the way I do politically and who knows that organized sports is so often weaponized for the glorification of war and the military, and how sad that is. And then also somebody who's so passionate about the game and almost feels as though it's an affront to the game to smear it with this. And like just the way that the lyrics are written it's perfection. It's like lightning in a bottle. Like it makes me emotional every time I listen to it, and it makes me want to quit ever even trying to write lyrics again. And so, like, by that time, like, I love Propaganda. I always will. As the metal got more into it, I got less interested musically because I'm just not a metal person.
Yeah.
But that being said, like, I love that band. I love those guys, and that song is like that's the mountaintop of songwriting in my book. Like, it doesn't get better than that.
Yeah. Have you guys had the opportunity like to play or tour with them since this album came out?
The last time we played with Propaganda was probably Fest in Gainesville in 2012.
Oh, wow. Yeah, they're definitely not a band that seems to like hit the road that hard. I mean, even, they're 6 hours down the road from us. And I mean, I've seen them, I can think like twice, maybe 3 times.
The joke at the label was always that they didn't tour because they didn't have to, because you can live in Winnipeg for $100. Like, that was the joke. I mean, I know it's not, you can't live in Winnipeg for $100, but it's less, maybe less of a grind than some other cities that somebody could live in. That was the joke around the label. I don't know if it's true or not. I don't know why they didn't tour a lot.
I'd be curious to hear that. Maybe it was just one of those things which is crazy because they're such talented musicians. I mean, they put out such fantastic albums, and I mean, they clearly put a lot of time and effort into those albums. But I mean, that touring's not for every band, and if they can
smart,
get their music
they know
out,
that when they do go out, like, every show is going to be packed because people have been waiting and waiting to see them. Yeah,
that's true. Maybe just a different kind of ethic, like, I know, like, bands like you said, you just wanted to get that out there as much as you could. And I mean, for the most part, punk bands have to do that, or smaller bands have to do that just to gain more fans, especially, before social media and all that. But yeah, it is an interesting thing how there are select bands like that just kind of seem to grow kind of organically without really having to push it. And maybe they're just happy to put their music out there, and, whatever comes kind of thing. Oh, that's awesome. The third one is No Use for Names, Hard Rock Bottoms. This is the 6th album by No Use for Name. It was released on June 16th, 2002. Another great band, very prominent in the skate punk, melodic, pop punk scene on Fat. Again, they had a handful of albums out already by this one. So why did you pick this one?
I love all their stuff, and Tony is like one of my favorite songwriters of all time. And the reason I picked that album is just because International U Day, kind of like Your Coach's Corner, it's one of those songs that, like, I lay awake at night wishing I'd written it. Like, it's so beautiful and so hard-hitting and emotional. And I remember at his memorial service, Joey K played it on acoustic guitar and sang it, and like everybody in the whole place was just bawling. And
wow,
it's just a beautiful, beautiful song. And Tony, Tony would roll out of bed and like write a beautiful song every day, but like that particular one, it just always sticks in my head, and I always think about it. And I always think about when we got the tour together, how fun it was to watch that song. Watch them play that song live, because it got such a good reaction everywhere they went. Like, they had tons of songs that the crowd would love and sing along with, but that one in particular, like, you could tell it wasn't just me. Like, that hit people in the feels everywhere. And So even though there's a lot of their stuff that I love, that particular song is why I chose that album.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a powerful thing when one song stands out enough to make a whole album stand out. That's a pretty incredible impact that that a song can have. Yeah, that's a band that I never got to see live, unfortunately. I don't know if they came through these parts that much or not.
And the Prairies, probably not.
I don't. Yeah, I know. I still think about that every time I'm listening to an album. It's like, man.
Unfortunately, a lot of
awesome,
bands did Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, and that was it. And like we would tour through the Prairies almost every year, and we would tell people like, "Dude, you got to go. The shows are great. People are stoked. It's awesome." And like, we always had great shows. We always had great shows in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and we would always tell people to go. But I think a lot of bands just skipped it.
Yeah, well, it is a trek, and there's not a whole lot kind of on the American side underneath of those provinces. So I get it, but I mean, like to us, when I saw you guys here, I was still living in a small town in Manitoba. Any chance you know of the Dauphin Kings hockey team? Oh man, that's incredible.
That's Manitoba Junior Hockey League.
Yeah.
Junior A.
Yeah. So that's the town I grew up in, and so I saw you guys when I was in high school. I saw you again when I moved here, but the first time I saw you, so we drove up here on a school night or whatever, and yeah, I mean, like to kids like us, like I couldn't believe a band like you guys were coming anywhere close to us, So we always counted it as a privilege and a gift when bands did decide to tour through here, and yeah, like you said, especially then, like the shows always seemed super good. And so
our last show in Regina which wasn't that long ago, was really good.
Yeah, at the Exchange.
With Off With Their Heads, I think.
Was that 4 or 5 years ago or something like that?
That was a great show.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, yeah, it's, a good testament again that, because you guys came through here so much, there's still enough people willing to come out.
That's the club that we played the first time we went there in 95 too. Same club.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the first time I saw you guys was at the Riddell Center at the university, a bit bigger of a place. I can't remember who that show was with.
That must have been.
It would have been like
in Regina,
2000, 2001.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. Peter probably did the show.
Yeah.
We did play there a bunch of times.
Yeah, those were awesome shows. I still got some pictures from that. My old film camera. Yeah, those are good memories. But yeah, getting through this list. The number 4 is Tilt with Till It Kills. This is the second studio album by Tilt and was released on April 1995. This is one of those bands that I've never really heard a whole lot on. I never saw them live. I'm not sure if, again, they came up this way or not. But yeah, why does this band and album strike a chord for you?
They were kind of their release came right after ours, I think. Their first release on Fat. They'd already had another album out, but we didn't. But they were from sort of the same area, like they're from the East Bay, and we met them on the first Fat Records tour, which was before God and Country came out, but it was like that month, and it was us and Strung Out, Tilt, No Use, and Lagwagon, and
awesome.
And we met them, and we hit it off really good. And then in the spring of 95, No Use took us to Europe for our first time, but the tour bogged down because half the tour got sick, like so sick to the point that we couldn't have shows. Yeah, so we all came home, and Destiny, who was our booking agent in Europe, like later on, so that next fall, it was in September, they booked us and Tilt a co-headlining tour, and it was a gnarly tour. It was about 7 weeks. It was all squats and youth centers through Europe, and it was really gnarly. And we felt we owed it to the booking agency after the No Use tour thing had happened, that like we wanted to make sure that we could show them as Good Riddance, like, hey, like we'll come through for you guys. But we shared a bus with Tilt, and just got to be really, really close with them. And sort of we felt a kinship with them, kind of lyrically and politically. Like they're cut from a little bit of a different cloth than a band like Lagwagon or a band like Strung Out. And we felt a kinship with them. And also I just thought that Cinder was such an amazing singer, and getting, playing with them every night and then watching them sound check. It's like, I'd go up to sound check and I'd tap on the mic and go, check 1, 2. And then Cinder would go up there and sing like a Janis Joplin song, pitch perfect, a cappella. And I just felt like the worst singer in the world. But like she was really, really a great singer, super sharp. And I love her lyrics on that album because they're potent, and they're coming from a lot of them are coming from a feminist perspective, obviously, which in my opinion, the punk world was and is lacking. But they weren't beating you over the head with it. They were very like clever and tongue in cheek, and kind of like you had to kind of be on the know to get it, or listen to the song twice to get it. And I just think that the songs are great, the lyrics are great, and it reminds me of those 7 weeks we spent with them on tour, grinding it out in Europe.
Yeah, well, that's really rad. Yeah, they're definitely, not your kind of typical what you would think of as Fat Records punk band, but yeah, really unique band, like you said, a lot of cool stances to share and something different, and that's another thing that I like about Fat Records is, they were always willing to, have bands that maybe just kind of wanted to do something similar, or bands that really wanted to kind of, push the envelope, and there was kind of lots for everyone to take from there. If you just kind of wanted, feel good punk, you could have that. If you wanted something with more depth and more, kind of dynamics, then there were bands like Tilt as well. And so, yeah, really, really cool release for the label.
They had a really East Bay sound, and I think that like what you're talking about is there seemed to be this misconception that there was a Fat Records sound, and maybe there was, like when Lagwagon's first album was out and it was just that and no effects. But I don't think that lasted long. I think that there was a huge variance of styles and genres on the label in almost no time, and Tilt was a big part of that. Like Tilt didn't sound like anybody else.
Yeah, and maybe again it was just, when I first discovered Fat Records bands, again it was a small town, didn't have internet, and so I kind of only heard, the main kind of 5-6 bands that did have that kind of skate punk flavor, and so it kind of wasn't until later that I kind of got into some of the other bands and kind of figured out that, okay, it's not all the same, but I mean that's kind of a general, if you kind of mention Fat Records, someone's like, okay, it's probably within this realm or something close to it, but not everything fit that exact mold for sure. And the last one we're going to touch on here is Dillinger 4's Civil War. So this is the 4th album by them. It was released on October 14th, 2008. Its recording and production took place over several years, and its release date was pushed back several times. So it was 6 years between this album and the one before it, which is a pretty long span for, a punk band. So you must have been super excited when this one was officially released.
What's funny is I had listened to a little bit of Dillinger 4 and knew who they were, and I actually knew them better for the club that they ran in Minneapolis, the Triple Rock.
Oh, okay.
Like we would play there, and my other band played there more, Only Crime, but we would play there, and everybody just knew that was it was the Dillinger 4 guys. But I wasn't super familiar with their music. And then one summer, Only Crime was touring across Canada, and with a guy that we brought with us, Robin, who sold merch, he was driving a lot, and he would play this album, and I was like, holy fuck, like, because I'd heard Dillinger 4 songs before, and I thought they sounded like I loved their sound, and they reminded me of an old band from St. Louis called Ultraman. They reminded me of Ultraman. So they had this really kind of husky Midwestern sound, and I dug it. But Civil War sounded different to me. The vocals sounded different, the way they were recorded or mixed. And I was like, fuck, there's every single song on this album is is the best song on the album. Like sometimes that happens. Like that happens with it. It's happened to me with a couple Pennywise albums where there's no filler. Like every song is the best song on the album, and that's how I felt about Civil War. And I just could not stop listening to it. And every song was just long enough where like it would end and you'd be like, fuck, I want to hear that song again. You know what I mean? Like it was the perfect album. Like they did everything right. The songs are just long enough. They're bam, they're done, and you want to hear it again. And every song is got super hooky choruses and great melodies. And I still, to this day, I listen to that album. When I put it on, I listen to the whole thing through. I don't ever just listen to part of it.
Yeah, and that's pretty incredible when a band can do that. So I guess it was worth all those years in between, you know, whatever it was that they were working on, or why it got prolonged.
I've met them briefly at a festival. I don't know too much about them, but and now since then I've listened to a lot of their other releases, and I still like Civil War the best. Like I think it's a perfect album, because you always want to make a record that when it's done, you want people to be like, oh God, I'm glad that's over. You want them to go like right back to the beginning again because it ended too soon. And that's how I feel about Civil War. That's how I feel about every song on there. Like they hit you once or twice with like the best chorus you've ever heard, and then the song's over and there's another one.
Yeah, that's awesome. It definitely makes me excited to go back to it. Like I was listening through it a bit this week, and but yeah, I definitely want to dive back into it, especially with the way you described it. So yeah, that's really cool to hear. You know,
and it came out of nowhere because like,
so much
they're on our label, but I was never really familiar with them. You know, and if Robin hadn't been driving us across Canada, like I may not have heard it. So I'm just stoked.
Yeah, that's crazy. Did they release much after that album? Okay. Yeah, I'll have to go back and they're another one of those bands that, I mean, there's lots of them. I'm sure you have those bands too, where it's like you're familiar with them, you know, maybe you know what label they're on, you've heard some songs, but you know, for whatever reason, you just haven't really spent the time digging into it. I mean, there's so much music to do that with, and so it's hard, but I mean, it's always great when you get such a great review from, you know, another established musician that has, you know, that is such a fan of an album. And so,
I mean, music's subjective, so like what I think is great, you may not think is great, but I know what you mean.
Yeah, well, but I mean, you're one of my favorite musicians, so if you say it's good, then there's got to be something there. So, yeah, that's awesome. That's 5 albums that stand out to you. And there's plenty more on Fat Records, and I mean, you know, people can hear that on me and David's episode. But well, Russ, I really appreciate you taking the time to share about these. And I mean, I've got tons of other questions for you, but maybe we can connect some other time and talk more about Good Riddance.
You can ask me now if you want.
And go through some of those.
I'm available.
Well, how about this? I'll just touch on one of my favorite Good Riddance albums, if that's okay.
Sure.
And so let's just talk briefly about Ballads from the Revolution. So this came out in 1998. This was kind of my first introduction to Good Riddance. I think maybe my brother got the CD or something, but it was kind of, I hadn't heard anything like this before. It might have even been the first kind of like, you know, more political punk album I would have gotten into. And at that point, you know, I was in maybe like grade 9 or something in a small town. I didn't really have any context to, you know, really what you were talking about lyrically, but there was something there that just kind of hooked me in and grabbed me, and still to this day I love going through this album. So you guys had 2 albums out before this one, but to me this album, you know, just stands out above those ones and just kind of solidifies, you know, as one of my favorite albums from you. So was this album kind of a natural progression for you guys as a band, or what do you remember about writing and recording this one from the previous 2?
Writing it was contentious. We were starting to have that. We were going through that thing that most bands go through, where like all of a sudden it matters who wrote what song, and there was a lot of it wasn't really a happy scene writing it for the most part.
Like you guys are butting
Yes,
heads on
yes.
kind of like topics or styles or what?
Just on like songwriting credits. I mean,
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to get into it, but it was
Yeah, no,
like,
that's fine. Yeah.
I wish I could tell you like, oh man, it was so great. We were all just like feeling it, and we do have albums in our catalog that did, that were done that way. This one was a little bit tougher than, like, for instance, the previous one. And also, but one thing that we did have going on is that all of us were wanting to go into a little bit of a harder direction.
Yeah.
I came when we got signed to Fat Records, like all I was listening to was Born Against, Econochrist, bands like that, and I wasn't listening to melodic stuff or like happy stuff. And the funny thing is, like, I say that, but like there's like the cheesiest love songs are on Ballads too. So but we wanted to hit it a little bit harder. And at the end of Ballads, that's sort of where we parted ways with Ryan Green as an engineer and a producer.
Okay.
And only like sonically were we wanting something different. Like we all love Ryan to this day, and that guy taught us so much about the studio and how to record an album, and so many things that we're like, I'm forever indebted to Ryan for just a million little things, because we came in to do Forgotten Country not knowing anything. So anyway, it was our third album with him, and we were starting to get into situations where we were wanting to, there'd be some screaming, and he would be surprised that we wanted to keep it, or like a feedback track. He'd be surprised that we wanted to have something that was atonal and kind of like screechy, and so we were pushing to play harder, to play, and we were touring a lot with bands like Sick of It All and Ensign and bands like that, and so we were influenced a lot by harder music anyway. So that was the main thing. Like stylistically, it was like songs like Choices Made maybe is on that album, I think.
Yeah.
Years From Now is on that album, I think.
Yeah, so good.
And then there's the first song that's like a classic Luke, because like a lot of the songs on our most of our albums, there's like a few songs, like 2 to 4 songs that Luke writes the music for, our guitar player, and then I come up with a way to sing it, and then the rest of the songs I write on guitar. And like Fertile Fields, like the first time at practice when I heard him play that minor, like that A minor chord, and it sounded so creepy and cool. And then, but then as what happens a lot is that he writes the song, and then I go to try to start singing it, and it turns out that what he thought in his mind what the verse was, I thought the chorus was, and vice versa. Like we're totally like oil and water when it comes to trying to navigate a song structure. So that song, what ended up being the chorus, it seems so cruel, that part. Like I think Luke envisioned that being the verse.
Oh, okay.
But it all worked out. And then having Chuck scream the call and response vocals in the chorus, I also thought was a really cool thing. And then we threw on the guitar melody over the ending, over that outro, which I thought was really cool. But like that's a typical like happy accident, not happy accident, but like that's a typical like Luke comes in with a just a really awesome riff or two, and we build a song out of it. Like that's how Weight of the World was as well on the album before that.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
And then there's no, what were you gonna say? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I thought you were done. Yep, keep going.
I was gonna say like that. So like, there's these hard songs, and we're getting into playing harder music. But then there's also, Not With Him, and there's also Genie, which was like when I brought Genie in, the guys looked at me and they're like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" Like,
Oh, it's such a good song though. It helps to kind of break up the album a little
ended
bit
up
and give
being
it some
cool.
dynamic.
It ended up being a thing that everybody kind of got into, and it ended up being like a pretty good time. But it was definitely a departure for us. It was definitely something that was not in our toolbox previously.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just as you're talking about it, I can just hear the songs in my head, and I'm going to listen to this album again tomorrow. But yeah, what was cool is, when this album came out, again, like for me, I didn't have, that much context or, other references. And so I would have never even picked up on, like, oh, like this song sounds out of place, or, there's a cover song on this album, right?
Yeah, a Kiss song.
Yeah, which I mean, I don't even know if I knew who Kiss was then. And so, again, I love these memories for me because it was just all new and exciting for me, and these songs stand out still to this day. So, yeah, just kind of, so you mentioned a bit, kind of about aggression and melody, and I've always loved that about Good Riddance. You know how to just meld those two so nice. Sometimes it's just, kind of more straight heavy, sometimes it's just straight melodic, and sometimes it's kind of mixed. How do you, is that just kind of a natural thing, kind of whatever fits, or when you're writing, is it like, okay, this is going to be an aggressive one, so try to like stay away from the melody, or how does that kind of all play out when you guys were writing, or how you do it now?
I think that was still a point where I hadn't quite figured it out yet. One of the things that we learned when we went after that to the blasting room for the first time to work with Bill and Stefan was Bill had listened to all our previous 3 albums, and he sat us down. He's like, look, each one of these records sounds like 2 different singers. He goes, why don't you find a way to make it sound like one guy? And I'd never thought about it before. And so what his suggestion was is like, don't try to sing like the super melodic pretty guy, and don't try to sound like super screamy hardcore guy. Like be somewhere in the middle, but be consistent. Like, listen, his example was Milo and the Descendants, and he's right. Like, Milo's voice is gruff and sort of rough around the edges, but it's melodic, but it's always the same. And so Milo can hit it hard and he can hit it soft, and it always sounds like Milo. And I really took that to heart. But when we did Ballads, I still hadn't gotten there yet. So to me, when I listen to Ballads, it sounds like 2 guys. It sounds like the melodic singer guy, and it sounds like screaming and yelling guy. And it hadn't been brought to my attention yet that maybe that wasn't the best approach.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because again, I mean, because I've been listening to that album, for 20 years or whatever, it's just a Good Riddance album to me, and so I don't mind that as much. I definitely understand, what Bill and Stefan were saying, and I mean, I could definitely hear that now in your newer albums, but I don't know. I think it can kind of work both ways. I mean, sometimes a more aggressive voice works for a certain style of song, and vice versa. But yeah, I guess those are the kind of things you learn, and when you get to spend time, with seasoned producers like that, they kind of give you that input that's like, oh, okay, maybe I can kind of shift, my skill a little bit to kind of suit the music a little bit better.
Well, I think it helps to unite it. I think it helps to unite the sound of a record, which I think we had been, even with Ballads. I think it's schizophrenic. It's back and forth. And while you could have that, you could have the music do that, when the vocals do it too, to me, it's a little bit too jarring. Like, listening back now, knowing what I know now, like the Milo principle would have helped Ballads, I think, be a little bit more of a smooth ride through, sort of, sampling all of these different musical styles that we were getting into and also that were very much our own. Like Fertile Fields is, there's no other band that would write a song like that.
Yeah.
And so I think that, plus it's like I can sing through these and hit them hard because I don't really have a smooth voice. Like I don't sound like Brandon from the Killers. So like I don't have a smooth voice. So it's already going to sound punk. It's going to sound rough when I sing. So, like, and as you said, like our albums later on, I think we've reined it in to a good spot. But then I have Chuck there who can scream. I have Luke who can scream. Like I have people that can, like guys in the band, we can make it sound more percussive or more angry, or as the case may be, with backing vocals where they need to go. So that doesn't have to all be the lead vocal.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's as you grew as a band, you realize, like you said, like Luke and Chuck, they can kind of add their pieces too, and it doesn't all have to be on you. And so that sometimes that just comes with time and circumstances and experience. And I mean, it's still I'm still gonna love the vocals on that album. That's not going to change it, but it does make me, now when I go back and listen to it, I'm going to be more, I'm going to have a pick your ear kind of trying to pull out those parts.
It's cool that that's your favorite. That's not everybody's favorite, so that's cool.
Well, yeah, and I think, with a lot of my favorite albums, it's not necessarily even that I think it's like the best sonically. It's just, it stands out because when I heard it, it was something new. It was something exciting. It's always brought me back. So, I mean, sometimes there's those memories too, but I love the songs. Like I said, I love the melodic and the aggressive and just kind of how it pulled me in these directions that I hadn't really been pulled in when I heard this album. And so, I mean, I love all your records. This one for, just kind of those few reasons stands out a bit. But what are you finding, kind of like you mentioned, that you're kind of still writing now and working on stuff, and you're still kind of releasing albums every few years, which I read that you were kind of kind of spearheading the writing and recording and stuff on that. What are you finding is still inspiring you to write and create kind of these days, as you're getting older, you've seen a lot more, you've kind of been there and done that, so to speak, you've put out, 10 or whatever awesome albums. Like, what are you finding you still kind of have left to put out there?
Like the easy answer would be like, 2020, like there's like a million punk songs to be written about what's going on in my country.
Yeah, very true.
That's not really what gets me, because it's the saddest thing about like from 2007 to 2012, we didn't play at all. I didn't even see, I saw Chuck, but I didn't see Luke for like 5 years, or Sean.
Wow.
And then we started playing again, and we're sitting there playing like Last Believer at practice, and I'm thinking to myself, like, this song could be written about right now, like today, like, or a couple weeks ago, what happened in our capital. Like, it's sort of disheartening when you write these songs as a more or less naive young person, and you're like, this song is gonna lift people up and empower them, and we're gonna overcome the plutocracy, and it's gonna be killer, and you realize that it doesn't do any of that stuff. And you also you realize too that it has a much more profound effect personally with people, and ultimately those people go out and make their part of the world a little bit better. Like, so it's not a total lost cause, but it's sort of sad when, like, we wrote Last Believer probably like 1993, and it could be about today. And that's kind of fucked up. And so
crazy.
It sort of makes it makes me not be like, oh, this current event is happening, I'll write a song about it and it'll get better. Like, it sort of took the air out of those tires for me. What my struggle is, not really struggle, but, and you'll probably hear this from most people that do this, is that no matter what, if I'm sitting here and I look over across the room and there's my guitar, like, at some point I got to get up and play it. I have to.
Yeah.
I can't stop myself. And then once I start playing it, now there's songs. Now there's like melody ideas. And like pretty soon there's 2 songs, 3 songs. Like I did about a week and a half ago, I did an online Zoom songwriting class with Rhett Miller, who's my favorite songwriter in the entire world, tops. He's the singer of Old 97s.
That's awesome.
I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but his, like, I told you about like Tony's lyrics and like Chris's lyrics on Coach's Corner. Like Rhett Miller is the guy that ultimately makes me want to quit trying to write songs. And he had an online songwriting class. So it was an hour and a half. There was like 200 of us on Zoom. And he said that songwriting is magic. He's like, you sit down and there's nothing and you create magic.
Yeah.
But that's how it is. It's like you sit here, I'm watching a hockey game or whatever, and like every once in a couple minutes I'll look over at my guitar. And I like try to look, and I look back at the TV, and then I look back at the guitar, and like pretty soon the guitar's in my hands, and then pretty soon I'm banging on it, and like next thing you know, there's a melody. And that's just, I can't stop. Like it's not really a thing that I haven't found a way to turn it off. Whether I, in a band or not in a band. And so it's that's where the songwriting comes from for me, and then obviously once I've got some structure and a melody, I set the bar pretty high for myself lyrically. So then I got to start trying to write words, and how can I write something that's relatable and something that hasn't been already said a million times? How can I write something that might speak to somebody who's right now feeling undervalued or marginalized, or like they don't count.
Right.
Like, how can I write something that's going to lift somebody up and empower them a little bit, or just make their day a little bit better? And like, I learned a lot actually from that Rhett Miller class about songwriting. People were joking with me like, dude, you should be given a class. It's like, no, dude, like Rhett Miller's forgotten more about songwriting than I will ever know. And so that was a really cool experience to be part of, and it really gave me a lot of stuff to think about. But to answer your question, it's mostly just you're sitting there and the guitar's there, and the next thing you know, you have to play it. Like that's just how it is.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like I'm also a musician and a songwriter, and it's I'll get through those times where it's like, man, I got nothing coming to me, and I'll just pick it up, and next thing it's like, oh man, like. That's what's so cool about songwriting, where we don't need to, go on a big long spiel about that, but it's one of those things, like you said, like magic, right? It's like 1 second there's nothing, 3 minutes later it's like, man, like there's just something that just kind of came to me, or I was influenced by whatever it was, and now I've just created something that maybe a whole bunch of other people are really gonna
Another
enjoy.
thing that's cool about that is what Rhett Miller's thing is like I overthink. Like when I go to write lyrics, like it has to be perfect every time. And his whole thing was like, you gotta like mess it up. You gotta roll around in it. You gotta like just be kind of like crummy at first, because you can always rewrite. But if you don't have something there to look at and rewrite, you're never gonna have a song. And he talked about when he worked for a plumber, and his job back in the day, he worked for a plumber, and his job was to like get the old pipe and shoot water in one end, and all the gunk that was stuck in would come out the other end. He goes, that stuff that comes out of the pipe, that's your first 100 songs. Like you have to write crummy songs to ever write good ones. It made me feel better about like just grab the pen and write some lyrics, even if they're stupid. Like just write something, and then go in and tinker, and then go in and like rewrite and fix. Because like I'm such a critic of myself. I'm like, it's got to be perfect as soon as I set the pen down, and it's like, no, it doesn't.
Yeah, well, it's really encouraging and exciting to hear someone like you that's been writing songs for so long that still kind of has that excitement and desire to figure those things out, because there are lots of bands that they kind of find that one thing that they're good at and do, and they're fine to stick with it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it is a cool thing when, I guess that's just creativity, right? Like sometimes creativity dries up, and then sometimes it just kind of keeps going, because like you said, you can't stop it. And so that makes me really excited, and I'm sure many others, at the potential for more music from you. So what kind of, do you have any plans for the coming year? I know it's kind of hard to know what that is, but
the guys are starting to bug me about new songs. So there's that. So I've got Logic Pro on my computer, and I've got a bass and a guitar. And so the way Logic, I don't know if you use Logic or not, but I can basically sit here in my living room and record drums, bass, guitar overdubs, guitar leads, everything, and then go to a rehearsal space, and I can record vocals, vocal doubles, harmonies, everything. And I can send the guys complete demos of songs that I've written. So right now I'm in a stage where I have, a handful of songs, and I need to write, and I kind of even know how the vocal melody is going to go, but I haven't written lyrics yet. So the next step is to write some lyrics, and then head down to the rehearsal space and bang out some vocals on it, and then send them to the guys and see what they think. At the same time, I've got somebody who's interested in putting out a second solo album for me. And so I'm writing some more stripped down acoustic style stuff to that end.
Okay, well, that's cool. Yeah, nice to have, two different kinds of outlets as well. Gives you a bit more freedom in kind of the stuff you can write. And yeah, that works great that you can, that you can do all that, like you have the skills and gifts to play guitar and to sing and all, put all that stuff together. And
my guitar playing is passable. Like my guitar playing is good enough to like show Luke my idea, and then he plays it 1,000 times better.
Yeah, well, that's sometimes good enough. And man, I just want to end saying that the last time you put out was 2019, I think. That came out this summer. I was driving through the mountains. I was heading out to BC with my family, and man, that album that was the perfect time. Like I listened to that album so many times on those drives through the mountains, and there's very few albums that do that for me, where it's like, where I can listen to it over and over again, and so man, I can't wait
really
to hear what else you have, and just having that experience, being in the mountains, which I always love, and spending 8-10 hours a day, whatever, driving and just listening to that album over and over again. And I'm pretty sure it was in my top 5 albums that year. I'd have to go back and listen to that episode, but always love when you guys put out music. It's always super consistent, and there's a lot to take away from it. It's always too short, as lots of punk albums are, but excited to see kind of how you take the things that you've digested in the last couple of years and kind of how that comes out in your creativity. So keep it up, keep putting out music. There's still guys like us that want to hear it. So thanks for taking the time to speak with me today and to share albums that are special to you, and also an album that is special to me and many others. It's been really cool. Just getting to talk with you and ask questions. So really appreciate you taking the time to be here today.
Thanks for taking the time, man. Appreciate it.
And they're looking for talent, for winners. All my years of publicity, all the fashion shows and radio bouts for nothing.